Welcome everyone to episode 9 of the Umana Yana podcast. I'm your host, Josh Dripal, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. This person is a friend, a sister, someone I admire out in the community. There's just so many things that she does that just absolutely make my jaw drop on a regular basis. And I'm super excited for her to share some time with us today. And that guest today is Saira Batasar-Johnie. So a very intentional conversation that's probably very timely. We are both of Caribbean background, and there she is. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Hi, doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to see you.
Yes, always a pleasure. Can you hear me okay?
It's perfect. Yeah. How's your day
Amazing.
been going?
Going pretty well. I'm at the health spot right now. So I chose to not do this in my house with my children because they would be knocking down the door trying to talk to Uncle Josh.
Yeah.
So, um, and so I'm just trying to figure out, I've never done a live, or I haven't done a live since like COVID. So I don't
Okay.
know what to do on the screen. Do I just leave it? Like what?
Yeah, you're good. You're totally
Okay.
good. We'll see any comments and stuff that anyone's dropping. It's gonna scroll for us, and if we happen to not be able to address it in the moment, we can always scroll back up and catch it and just sort of address it there. But other than that, we're in the chat and we're recording, so we're just good to go. Nothing else for you to do. Just be yourself.
Wonderful. And how's your day going?
Awesome. It's been good. Super productive morning. Had some really good work that we did this morning on the project that we're working out here in Costa Rica. So just super grateful for things feeling aligned and moving in a positive direction. So, yeah. Yeah. So, the way I like to kick off our conversations, for podcasts, I noticed that there are oftentimes, the hosts, they run off this really long resume of things that their guest has done. And it's kind of like, well, do they really identify or lead with that when they're introducing themselves? So I want to turn it over to you for you to introduce yourself as you see fit, to our audience who's watching today or who might be catching the recording later on.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Saira Batasar-Johnie. I feel like I have so many titles when I was trying to think about how am I supposed to introduce myself today. Um, I was trying to think, okay, like what do I start off with? So, I guess in my professional world, I'm a child and youth care practitioner, a registered social worker, an educator. And then on my personal side of things, I feel like, well, I'm a mom, I have 3 kids, and I'm a wife, a daughter, a friend, a sister, and I'm also an author. And I put author in like my personal side of things because I feel like author is more of like my art, my creativity. And like I published for like the professional world before. But for those of you who don't know, like I wrote a short story called Dear Divya, and then it got turned into a novel. And hoping to be a series. So yeah, so that's me. I identify as Indo-Trinidadian and Guyanese Caribbean Canadian. I was born here in Canada. For those of you watching all over the world, Ontario, big up Toronto, hey, the six. um, and grateful to be able to be born on this land, live here, and work here, study here, given that it is stolen land. And my parents, so my dad was born in Trinidad, Cuba to be specific, and my mom was born in Guyana, and she traveled all over Guyana because my grandfather worked on um, a sugar estate, or like he was a chemist for the sugar factories, so they
Okay.
traveled all over. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I hope, I think that a lot of our audience is going to get to see a lot of themselves in this conversation today, with us both having that Caribbean background, you represent multiple flags. From my background, I represent Guyana. But, I that's never stood in the way of us having a really good relationship. Oftentimes like, oh my goodness, how is Guyana and Trinidad going to cooperate, right? But, it's been nothing but love. So I appreciate you. And, thank you for showing up in the world the way you do with the beautiful work you do, for all the things you do behind the scenes, that no one ever hears about or sees. I've had an opportunity to really, see behind the curtain of a lot of, day-to-day living, and you really show up as an exemplary human. So, for everyone who hasn't had a chance to experience Saira's work, be that several of the different written contributions that she's done, or her in-person offerings, and there's a whole bunch that she's working on already. I definitely encourage you to check it out. Dear Divya is a book that was very, very special. When I actually got to read that myself, it was like, wow, there's so much here. I feel like I'm walking through this story alongside these characters. So you did a brilliant job with that. Just
Yeah.
much love to you for that. So today we've got a really interesting conversation, and this is one that, we've sort of started, behind closed doors, right? But we were like, you know what, this is one that the community probably wants to listen in on because it's a big one. And, for those listening, our topic today is community healing in the Caribbean culture. And healing is definitely something. Healing is like one of those words that, like, it's like, don't say that one. I find that we often will swear a lot more easily than we'll actually say the word heal. And for me growing up, like a lot of us, I'm sure the usual thing was like, go grab some Vicks, right? Like Vicks is how you heal, right? And I think I'm grateful to be long enough that I've seen that we need a little bit more than Vicks. So, before we jump in, Saira, I really want to understand, who is captured when we're talking about the Caribbean culture, right? Like which flags, which country are represented within that, just so that everyone understands. Because I noticed that there's been a little bit of confusion around this over time.
So I think for me personally, just because this is where I resonate with, so I would say for me it would be Trinidad and Guyana when I'm talking about the Caribbean in my perspective. But the Caribbean, like each, so there's been this umbrella term, Indo-Caribbean, and that's what a lot of folks are using nowadays to identify. And I think that it's really important to understand that Indo-Caribbean is a umbrella term to identify with, and that it's important to identify with where is your Indo-Caribbeanness from? So are you Indo-Jamaican Caribbean?
Right.
Are you Indo-St. Vincent Caribbean? It's really important because your Indo-Caribbean, your Indo experience is going to be different from a person in Trinidad, from a person in Guyana. Those of us that are Indo-Guyanese, if you think back to slavery, and I learned this when I recently went to an Indo-Caribbean educators event, and I heard they had a speaker, and he said those first set of Indians, they were the people that watched slavery get abolished in Guyana. Who was there? They were there.
Right.
But it was so interesting, like that, like, oh wow. And they also experienced, like, he did like a deep dive into like the indentureship journey, and that's his research of understanding the stories of those first set of indentures
Right.
um, to Guyana. But that's to go back to your question, that when I identify as Caribbean, I'm specifically identifying Indo-Trinidadian and Indo-Guyanese because that's where I am from and that's what I've been surrounded with in my community predominantly.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because I've been thinking about this topic and even how we're exploring it, right? And much like you said, your experience is going to be so different whether you're, say, Indo-Caribbean from Guyana or Indo-Caribbean from Trinidad, or even if you're not from the Indo umbrella, right? Say you're from a different component of it, right? Like it's so mixed up within the Caribbean, right? That there's so many different avenues that you could arrive at that and your family, right? So, to me, it seems like it's a very broad and complex thing that we need to dive into when it comes to healing, because there's going to be so many different layered historical things that go into how all of us maybe perceive healing or even go about it. based on all of those factors of, our family, maybe who our family has married in with, and different things that we've kept from our lineage, maybe certain things that we've tried to intentionally forget, right? All of these things really come together and create this almost perfect storm for us to keep healing at a distance, because it feels very like, how do we do this? What do we do with it? Right? There's a lot of programming that's gone into our existence as a people, right? That healing might not even be part of our vocabulary.
For sure. And I feel like, especially for me and my journey of understanding my own history and where I come from, um, I wasn't taught Caribbean history.
Mhm.
Um, my parents, yes, I did the Indian dancing when I was younger. I was raised more, I was raised all three religions of Hindu, Christian, and Muslim. Well, sprinkles of Hindu, predominantly more Muslim and Christian, going to mosque and the church. I was Hindu on Diwali. And that was because of colonization in Trinidad, because my dad was born Hindu, but in order for him to go to school in Cuba, he had to convert to Christianity because there was only convert Christian schools in his village.
Okay.
So he converted to Presbyterian Christian. And so when I think about my history and understanding um, Caribbeanness, my Caribbeanness, I didn't really learn much about that until I got to university and I took an introduction to the Caribbean studies class at TMU. And I remember coming home and after this class, because I'm learning about indentureship, I'm like,
Yeah.
what? And I remember bringing home my course reader and like sitting down with my dad. And also because I was I was rejected from the South Asian student dance team.
Mm.
Because I wasn't Indian. And all this time my parents telling me I'm Indian. I'm watching the Saturday Indian shows with Ingrid and her dad. And so watch Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. Like I thought, why are we wearing these Indian clothes? Um, anyhow, I had some identity issues there. But my parents were like, oh well, back in the day we were farmers. So even the word indentures, like it wasn't used to tell me like what we were. I had to do that research and understanding on my own.
Right.
There's a lot of shame that came with indentureship or being descendants of indentures. Um, so even like that, the shame, the shame that like they carried, and
Yeah.
I don't feel that shame in our generation.
Mhm.
I see more of like just assimilate in our generation. It's easier to
Right.
just assimilate.
Mhm.
Um,
I see that. Yeah.
and so that's what I see happening more.
Mhm.
And it's just it's interesting to me because so why like this topic, I know I brought this to you and like I really want to share is why this topic that has been sitting on me for a while. May was Indian arrival, Indian survival, Indian removal month. That because that's when Indians first came to the Caribbean. And I've just been thinking and thinking, and then I went to this event. It was an Indo-Caribbean educators event, and there was a speaker there, brilliant man, Dr. Anil Prasad, and he posed the question to us about what is missing in our culture, like
Yeah.
what are we missing, but
Mhm.
he posed it as like what is missing, like that we don't know about
Okay. Yeah.
for our identity.
Yeah.
But I took the question of like what is missing right now.
Okay.
And it was just like we were vibing. It was such a great conversation. Like I think we like our eyes just like connected the whole time. And after he was done, everyone was sharing, and then he looked at me, he's like, I want to hear what you have to say. Like your hand is up. Like what do you have
Mhm.
to say?
Yeah.
And I shared the fact that, my mind went to like what is missing, and I think about like unity, and I think about the language. What was our language? A lot of us think Hindi was our language, but that wasn't the main language of our ancestors.
Right.
There's so many different sects of language that our ancestors used.
Hmm.
um, I think about community. um I feel like a community is missing. And he shared some stories about some really traumatic stories about the first people, the first indentures. Um and he shared a story about this young boy. And it was a very graphic story. I won't share it. Um but it made me think about, how do we heal from our trauma as Caribbean people?
Hmm.
um what does that look like? And so I shared, I'm like, we really like felt culture and drinking culture and lime culture and all these things, and we tend to like gravitate to that. And sometimes people drink more than they can handle. And but then I mentioned, like, are people ready for like communication culture,
Right.
healing culture, um and like really like confronting things culture, um and just ready to like move past that of what we know. Because really and truly, if we look back, like that's all they knew. That's
Mhm.
all our ancestors knew: working, and then you come off work and maybe you take a little drink and you relax, or maybe you go overboard
Yeah.
with that. And so it was great. Everyone clapped. Everyone clapped and was like, yeah, that's great. And there was one voice that was like, I can't pinpoint and quote what they said, but it was like something along the lines of like, people should just be grateful that they're here.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's those like small-minded, or those like closed-minded individuals that are not open to like the whole concept of addressing and moving forward, um is what keeps us in like a box. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I
And
hear you.
like I'm still like struggling to like figure out like how does that, like, how do we move forward as a generation that is like really really cycle breaking.
Yeah.
um and it's hard work being cycle breakers, because you're going up against your own millennial. Like, I'm a
Yeah.
millennial, proud millennial here. My husband's also a millennial. He doesn't like to admit it. But
Oh no,
um,
Captain Strays.
but like, how do we I guess, yeah, how do we move forward? And that's
Hmm.
something that I'm trying to figure out, because you see communities show up for like for all the like FET events, but do we see community showing up to like the healing and the wellness events when it comes to those things,
Hmm.
or supporting like healing and wellness? I'm
Right.
not sure. I'm not sure.
I hear you. And this is something that I myself have asked myself time and time again, like what's the mental roadblock that's happening here? And are we just keeping this in front of ourselves? Or is this, being placed in front of us as we sort of champion something, right? And so, what I've seen is that, say, how you said that we kind of lean into this fet culture, right? That's what we'll show up for, right? We won't miss one of those. But we'll miss, we'll miss Saira's, sacred healing circle on Saturday night, right? Because we have a party to go to, right? But what I found is that it almost just ties into this whole idea of going to the familiar, right? Like, we know it's not serving us well. For example, drinking, if we're going to drinking, right? We know
Yes.
it's not serving us well. We know it's giving us more work we're going to have to do in the long run. But it's all we've known. It's what we've seen, right? This is what's been modeled to us. So we've kind of, embedded it in our just habits. Sometimes we don't even think about it, right? And we do that. Another thing that I've seen, and you spoke to this as vocabulary. And I think as writers, we get that opportunity to really like wordsmith things, right? And get really in there and try to empower other people with this language. But I find that the language stuff oftentimes from a male perspective, I've noticed that oftentimes as men, we're kind of limited in terms of how we communicate our feelings and the things we're going through, right? It's usually like I'm angry or I'm furious or I'm sad, right? And then I've noticed that I was actually just having a conversation very recently around a conversation that was heavy, right? It's one of those emotional conversations. News that's not the greatest is being communicated. But I saw what we're doing is we're leaning into humor. We're not necessarily, we'll touch on it, but then it's like for every time we touch on it, we're going to do like three jokes, right? Like we're just so uncomfortable in addressing those things. And I think a lot of it does tie into that, all the different mental things that happened to us during the indentureship experiences that we never got to unpack, where it's kind of just like you got to show up and appear strong, even if you aren't, right? Don't look like you got anything like dragging you down, because that's just going to show weakness, and we can't be weak. Right. And I think that's what feeds into the comment that you received there about the whole you should just be grateful you're here. I
Yeah.
think that maybe what I've seen from the generation before me is that there was a lot of this expression when they ask about our history and our culture and things like that. I find that the usual way that goes is for them to get into almost argumentative, right? It's not so much to be curious and explore. It's more like, oh, well, you should have done better. Or, why did you do this? It's more critique based. But I find our generation, as we're trying to ask these questions of our elders now, we're doing it from a place of, you have a wonderful phrase for it. I don't know if you want to share it with everybody.
Which one?
The reclaiming and reconnecting one?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh my goodness. I don't know what is it? Reconnecting. Why you didn't tell me that?
It's the catchphrase.
It's reconnecting to the culture, reclaiming your identity. I have to do it in the perspective of like when you stayed with us, of like
Yeah, yeah,
Josh was reconnecting to the culture and reclaiming his identity, right? That it?
exactly. Yeah,
Something along those lines.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I find we're trying to do that. We're trying to understand where did we come from,
yeah.
right? And when we're doing that, we're coming across, you know, our elders are not used to communicating this as well, right? The things that they didn't heal from because healing wasn't even part of their vocabulary. So now we're kind of in this role of cycle breaking and educating our elders and educating those who are coming after us and holding space and being compassionate and also not trying to chew someone's head off when they're not holding space effectively for us as we're trying to heal.
Mm-hmm.
I find like that's all on our shoulders all at once. And that's what I find a big challenge is for us as we try to navigate this in real time.
100%. And I feel like when you think about healing, I I feel like healing and we're talking about community. So for me, healing is unlearning. Healing is, new learnings. And like ways of like I feel like there are ways that you can heal and keep the culture alive within like just even for me as a parent. I feel like I'm constantly um unlearning as a mom, but I'm still keeping the culture alive within my house. My kids still know they're very much Caribbean.
Yeah.
Um, and but I can do that in like a positive way and a happy and exciting way without the trauma that's attached to certain things. So I recently did an activity about like with them to hear what their responses were because these are things that I was raised with, like wait until you get home.
Yeah.
um I think like I made the video with the kids and I for Mother's Day, and it was just for me it was just reaffirming to me that like I'm really Neil and I are both really making a conscious effort to not have our kids raised that way, and no blame to our parents at all. It's just that's all they knew
Mhm.
how to do.
Absolutely.
um and I think healing and community goes hand in hand. When I think about my Caribbean community, I think about what like supporting one another and what does that look like.
Yeah.
So for example, for me, I'm very conscious of like when I'm doing something, I'm trying to support my Caribbean community. So
Yeah.
if I have my own private practice, um, so I will try and make so if I'm using a website designer, they're a Caribbean person.
Right.
If I need stuff done in my house, I'm going to try and hire a Caribbean person because that's how you build community.
Yeah.
That's how you connect with community.
Absolutely.
So I think that healing and community go hand in hand because our community hasn't supported each other.
Mhm.
And that's another thing is why can't we all work together for the same common goal? Why can't we all work together um, if we want the same thing?
Yeah.
You know, Brown Girl Diary, for example, they've created this amazing directory of mental health therapists. I've sent so many people there. I've
Yeah.
looked on there with my own clients when they need support. But like that's community building. That's community supporting.
Right.
Um, so I feel like the generation before us, they did a really good job in like they came here during the in the 1950s and 60s when the government was doing this. I just saw it at a bookstore that I went for a book launch where the Caribbeans came over as caregivers, and it was a whole thing from the Caribbean where they
Yeah.
came over as like nannies and just I forgot the specific word, but they came over to Canada, and that's where this that does the second diaspora I feel like started.
Mhm.
That and then you because you have a Caribbean community in the UK, you have a Caribbean community in America, like in New York. We know there's a huge one, and Toronto has the highest number of Guyanese living in it.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that. So if that's a huge number, there's only $800,000 800,000 Guyanese people living in Guyana, but the largest diaspora of Guyanese people are in Toronto. How
Right.
come we haven't been able to come together to work together to benefit our people?
Yeah.
Um, and so that's where I don't know the answers. I'm just asking all these questions.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's what it's about, right? Like to actually like, try and understand these things and navigate them together because we're living in it, right? And we know, like, we see it, especially with these numbers. You're right. It's actually mind blowing when it's like, I would sit back and be like, if I was actually to be honest with myself, how much support do I feel I actually have coming from the Caribbean community, despite how many people's names I know? Right. And it's like, if I got to be real with myself, there's a huge breakdown that's happening and we got to get to the root of this. And, I think a lot of this ties back into what, you shared on before, right? With, say, indentureship and survival, right? Like our people have been stuck in a very survival mode versus a live and thrive kind of mode for a really long time. So I think there's a lot of this like scarcity mindset that we really lean into or habitually kind of just, it's our reflex, right? It's like, it's just that connection that we have in things. So whether that comes down to, oh, you know what, family wants to go out to dinner tonight. I'm going to go to Saira's restaurant because I want to support her and I love her food, right? Why doesn't that happen, right? I find, and I've been part of these conversations where people are trying to decide to go and they literally say these things out loud. Nah, you know what, they're doing too well. I don't want to go to their head. Like different things like this. So it's not that I found in my personal lived experience so far, it's not that we don't know that there are faces that look like us and are members of our community that we could go and choose to support. But what I find is that we actually make a little bit more of a concerted effort to go out of our way. We have this, it's often been said to me, the crabs in the bucket mentality, where it's like no one, like if you see someone climbing up, like you're going to grab them down. You're not going to cheer for them to get out and, really like carve out a path for themselves and, say you with your personal practice and doing all these different things to bring in all the freedom for yourself, right? Some people can look at that and be like, wow, that is so inspiring. Saira's providing me with a blueprint that I myself can sort of custom cater to me and what I'm doing and that can help me to thrive, right? And
Oh no. Am I supposed to? Hello?
Oh, we're
Is
okay.
it
Okay, cool. The
is it
power just
me?
went out.
Is it me or is it you?
No, the power just went out and just came back on.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Wonderful. Welcome
were you able
back.
to hear me what I said?
Yeah, I lost you. Crabs in the bucket mentality. And then I don't know where you went. Scarcity and yeah.
Yeah, I was just tying it back to that. Like it seems like we kind of just choose to make decisions, even though we know when there are faces and members of the community we can actually go support. There's this sense of distrust, I find, a general sense of distrust. Or, we just create these narratives around, oh, well, you can't trust Guyanese people, you can't trust this kind of people, whatever. You know what I mean? We almost like advocate against ourselves.
Well,
And it's like, what are we doing?
yeah, what are we really doing? Because you see other communities are so strong. So why isn't ours? Because even when I was looking for a contractor to do work on my mom's house, I was asking around. A
Yeah,
lot of people told me, "Don't go with Caribbean people. What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, that's how we support our people. Um, and so that's why I'm intentional about supporting the community, but I'm only one person. I don't know if others have this perspective of like wanting to support um specifically their own community.
yeah.
And so I'm looking at the comment and it's throwing me off.
Right. You want me to read it out for it?
Yeah. I don't have my glasses. I just see lines.
No worries, no worries. So from Kimmy here, we have that there's so many truths here, it's not black and white. Thinking about where did they learn these messages and how was this passed on?
And to be honest, I really think it stems from colonization. If we look at how everything started in the Caribbean, the divide that was created in the Caribbean between Afro and Indo, Black and Indians. And then I guess we would have to do further research and understanding how divides were created within our own people, and
Mhm.
why that happened, because we all were together, or our descendants were all like our ancestors were all together in the barracks cutting the sugar cane, doing rice planting, whatever it was.
Yeah,
um but then there's still this notion of not don't support one another. I find so i find that we can support each other when it comes to a religious aspect. So I watched my uncles be a part of building a mandir in the East End. I
okay.
watched my mom's family be a part of building a mosque in Etobicoke. And churches not so much over here, but from a religious aspect, I watched the community come together to do those things.
Gotcha.
um but like, why hasn't I feel like, so when I went to an event last year, the vice president of Guyana came down, and I had just come back from Guyana with a group of my students, and I asked them the question because they were talking about oil, the oil industry, come back to Guyana, come invest, etc., etc. And I asked the question of, um, given all this funding, this money that the country is now getting,
Yeah,
how are you going to divert some of that money to like the mental health sector in Guyana?
yeah.
And his response to me, because Guyana is number two around the world with the highest number of suicide rates.
Mhm.
They just experienced it's been 2 years since the fire in the Medea fire, where
Yeah,
19, I think 19 young people passed away. Um, and that was like all worldwide news. So
yeah.
in his response, he responded with, they heavily rely on the mosques, like their imams, their pundits, their priests, to support people who are struggling with mental health challenges. And I was not happy with that answer, because as much as we'd love for those folks to be equipped to support folks with mental health challenges, they're not. They're not equipped to support people who are struggling with mental health. And so I followed up, and I was able to have really long discussion with the director of mental health in Guyana. And I think over here, so the older heads who were part of creating mosques and mandirs didn't have that mindset of like, go to a pundit, you need a jari, or let's go talk to imam, let's see what's happening, or let's go talk to a priest, and like rely on religion to support them, versus
Yeah.
creating, I don't know, for example, a community center where all these resources will live, and it's predominantly like Caribbean ran. And so that hasn't, like, we don't have that in existence right now. Other communities have
Mm.
community centers specifically for their cultures, but for
Yeah.
example, my friend who's a lawyer, if he's supporting, say, an Indo-Guyanese person,
Sorry,
he
sorry, you're cutting out a lot. Sorry. Are you able to just change locations by chance?
changed.
It's cutting out and it's kind of blurry on my end. Is it showing clear on your side?
Hello,
Hi,
is it better?
can you hear me? Yeah. Is it showing clear on your side? Is the internet connection okay?
You're blurry.
Oh, because you're blurry for me and it's cutting out a lot.
Oh, how is
Okay.
it for
Let's see.
Priya? If you're still there, is it blurry? I don't know who's still here.
Is this any better?
I turned my data on, so I'm not on
Okay.
Wi-Fi.
Okay. I'm fully connected here. Does it look do I look clearer to you now?
No, you're still blurry.
Am I? Okay. You're still blurry too. Oh, can we say we're both blurry? Shoot.
Oh
Hmm.
no.
That's unfortunate. Okay. Well, I know we both, this is obviously a very high impact conversation we want to be having, and we want to make sure that the quality is good. So, Saira, you tell me, like, do you feel comfortable in us continuing? They can hear us, so they have the audio of it. Or did you want us to record separately and we do that on a different platform and then we kind of like upload that video to say YouTube because it can't really come on to Instagram. What do you think would be good?
Well, can people hear us? Because if they can
Yeah,
hear,
they're saying that they can hear us fine.
yeah, if they can hear us, then that's okay. Like, I feel like we can continue.
Okay, for
I,
sure.
on my phone, I'm clear. You're just blurry, and
Same.
not
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. All good. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, no, it's okay. I don't remember what I was talking about. I think I was talking about like a community center of the sorts of like,
Yeah.
yeah, my friend who's a lawyer, he has nowhere to um send someone who like for housing, or if they need like mental health or psychotherapy support. Like, there's no Indo-Caribbean specific place that he could send someone
Hmm.
to. Um
Interesting.
or like, like somewhere, like there's no hub where, that he knows if
Yeah.
he sends this person to, I don't know, the Caribbean community place,
Mhm.
get all the support that they need, and they're gonna understand where this person is coming from, and like the culture and all of that, because a lot of people don't
Yeah.
really understand Caribbean culture. A lot of people
Yeah, it's
think,
true.
when I first started working in the school board, I would say, "Oh yeah, I'm from Guyana," or my mom's from Guyana. They're like, "Ghana, like Africa?"
Yeah.
I'm like,
I hear
"No,
you.
like like North, like South America." Like, I'm just like, yeah. So, and I find that my kids kids are getting the same response. So I've had to really teach them where they are on the map, how to describe where they are, like where they come from on the map, so that people understand where they come from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, like you touch on something really important, like us actually seeing ourselves in these spaces, understanding how, if it's something that actually is on our heart to do, how do we actually, you know, connect more with our people who are from the same community, right? Because I've had similar experiences, say when I go to a therapist, right? And I've had therapists from different backgrounds. And, you know, there are some where it's like I feel like I'm doing double work trying to help you understand where I'm coming from and what's paining me, and then by the time I'm done that, the session's over, right? So it feels rather ineffective. So, you know, I'm curious for you, the way you show up and you know, having your own practice and being in service to people, have you felt that you making sure that you're visible out there and you're really trying to represent, have you found that that's made a difference in the clients that you work with, you know, who you feel is drawn to you and working with you and whatnot? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think for me, so that's one of the reasons why I wrote Dear Divya, because I wanted young people to see themselves in literature. I never saw myself in a story. I never saw, you know, a darker skinned brown girl be seen as beautiful with
Mm,
my curly hair. I used to be called Frizzlehead. Like it took me a very long time to accept my hair for what it is because I got teased for it. A lot of my cousins have straight hair. I was called Miss Frizzle. Um, and so that was a part of me writing Dear Divya and being a CYC,
yeah,
being in the school board. I was often the only person of color in whatever school I was working for, like working in, and the only Caribbean person.
right,
So there would always be like all the students who were people of color would always gravitate to me. Um, and I would always have like my soca or my chutney going in my office.
yeah,
And that's exactly how I am in the classroom. Now, as I teach in college and university, my class starts with soca music. I always have fire blazing going. I'm
love
introducing them to that DJ. And Miss, like these mixes are wild. Like, what kind of music is this? Um, and you know, I have my Trinidad and my Guyana maps in my office, and they come and they're like, oh, you're from Trinidad, or you're from Guyana, like, can you tell me more about this? Or like, I personally try and show up as like my authentic self. I don't like when people try and quiet me, and I've had those experiences where I've been told, oh, you can't speak like that.
it.
Speak like what? Because I told someone to get their backside to class. um, and, or speak in my dialect or my tone of voice. It's not appropriate.
Yeah,
And I'm like, but it's okay for those two teachers to speak Italian to each other, but for me to speak in my tone of voice to a Caribbean student, that's not okay.
right.
Um, I've and even like in my classroom, I tell my students, I'm like, if you don't understand something that I'm saying, like I'll say like, them head no good. Tell me, and I'll
Yeah,
explain to you. Like, and half the time my coworkers don't know what I'm saying because I don't I don't feel like I should like change who I am in my space,
yeah.
um, just to fit into a box. And my coworkers will be like, okay, what did you say? Like, ask for clarification. Um, and so for me, like showing up and being proud of where I'm from, and being proud of my culture, being proud of just everything, is really that's really really important to me, and making sure that my children know where they come from, where their grandparents are from, making sure that they understand their history and what history that they carry with them is
Exactly.
very important for me. Um, because I was raised with sprinkles. the good stuff. I wasn't raised with the history. And until I got to like my adulthood where I actually took a deeper dive in understanding my history. Um, but still being proud of my history and where I come from.
Yeah.
Um, like I'm thankful for my ancestors. When I went to Guyana, I had a very emotional moment last year. Um, we went to Unity Beach in Mahaika. And we took our shoes off. Myself and my colleague Anamika, she came with me, and we stood in the water. And I can't tell you, like there was like this heavy feeling on my chest,
Yeah.
and like I just started crying because it's like and then you're just looking into the water and you're seeing the sun hit the water, and I just like for me, I reflected in that moment of like the journey of like my ancestors from India, the
Mm.
journey my ancestor, like my mom took from Guyana to Toronto, being
Right.
someone who kind of overstayed their welcome and had to figure out how to stay in the country. Um, and so, and even my dad being the first one to leave Trinidad in the 1960s, and he was one to bring all of his friends and his family over
Mm.
from the villages, and
Yeah.
he let them stay there. He was that person. Um, it took me back to like, if only they could see us now. If only they could, like, and Anna Choti, she made like a really good or she it's in my book, Dear Divya, we are the gold that our ancestors waited for, or it was
Yeah.
paraphrasing.
Yeah. I remember that one. Yeah.
That always resonates with me because we are the gold. We are the gold that they worked for. We are the gold that they dreamed of. Um, and it's just it's a very emotional thing, and I feel like we have so much privilege, so much voice, and so much power that it's a shame if we don't use it in a right way.
Agreed.
And a right way to like heal, to advocate, to educate, and to unlearn.
Yeah.
And to honestly just come together and be open and honest with each other,
Mhm.
on move forward on how to connect and build communities. So I'm sorry, I totally went on a rant.
No, no, no. No, and all of that was incredibly valuable because like I'm guilty of having done sharing that you have resisted, which I came to understand the term is code switching, right? Like I have been in a lot of spaces where you would not expect to find someone who looks like me, right? And I mean on a professional level. So I found myself often making sure that I was less Will Smith and more Carlton, right? I was making sure my hair looked straight. I was using Dippity Doo number 12 to make sure that my hair goes back straight, like no curls, because curls insist that you're something not like the others, right?
Right.
So
100%.
so I totally get what you're saying. And like as I've gotten older, I've gotten to deal with myself and understand, hey, you know what? You were kind of looking at your people with a bit of shame, just like a lot of the rest of the world is looking at them. How about like if you being from that community are even doing this to your own people, now I am doing the harm that I'm on the receiving end of. So I need to explore this. I need to understand my tendencies and why I'm doing this. And I think a lot of it really comes down to me accepting truths that were passed down to me from other people that I never got to explore. So say, for example, the sense of distrust, or it's only a matter of time before this happens, or, all of those different things. These were not my truths. This was just stuff that was passed down and, nothing was vetted by me. I just took it as fact. Right. And
Mhm.
then we end up just creating more and more of the separation when we could easily be building those bridges. And I so resonate with what you're saying because like I've never been to Guyana myself yet, but like since we've worked collaboratively on that project 2 times removed, getting to see and really connect with more of our stories, I thought to myself, I'm like, you know what? Whenever the moment should happen that I actually touch down on this land, I know I'm going to burst into tears because there's just something about it. It's like a coming back to yourself type of thing. And, living the way we have over the last year or so, now being in Costa Rica and, being in a climate and visually a representation that I imagine is a lot closer to Guyana than the concrete jungle of Toronto, like, it's like, this feels really good. Why was I so resistant to this? Why did I have so many prejudices that I was holding on to, about like how backwards our people are or, all these different things. And it's just like this was just bred out of absolute ignorance. And I was perpetuating this ignorance. So, I think my call to action for our community is very much like, these things that we're holding on to, whether it's our habits, our thoughts, the way we treat one another, like let's actually sit back and reflect on that for a sec. Like how much of this is mine and how much am I just carrying? Have I actually thought about the deeper impact of what I'm doing in this moment, in 10 minutes, in 10 years? Have I thought about that? Like all of these chances for us to actually connect and feel supported. You talk about community, and community is so huge, as we have all experienced, especially in the last few years. I think it's really been highlighted how much community is essential for our well-being and our sense of connectedness to something bigger than ourselves, right? I think it's so, so crucial for us to examine these things and to actually ask these questions like you and I are asking to one another right now, right? Like have a vulnerable conversation with your friend and be like, yo, for whatever reason, man, like I was feeling this type of way. What's that about? Right? Like we need to just unpack this stuff and not feel like we're under a microscope of someone judging us as we do it, right? Like we gotta create that safe space for one another so we can actually heal and move together forward because that's what more of this time is calling for, right? Like that's what more of us need.
And I think the important thing is that we're being mindful that we're not repeating like systemic colonialism within the communities that we're creating,
Yeah.
um, because that's really easy. That's easy to do because of all the policies that have been created. I know for me, like my mom and I, we have our own non-for-profit. We've worked with many non-for-profits that are like strictly like grassroots and community oriented, and that's how you build community, by working together. um and so that's like one thing that I've noticed now is like how do we continue doing that? How do we continue and how do we pass that down to the next generation that's coming up? um and they're going to want to know what their community is and where their sense of identity is and how who to connect with and how to resonate with and where to go. So I feel like there's still so much work to do
Yeah.
with like creating our community, creating a healthy community.
Mhm.
I'm healing from a lot of the stuff that
Yeah.
we have experienced. Some folks have never experienced any trauma within their households, whereas a lot of folks have. Um, they've gone through traumatic households. Um, and it's like, how do you navigate that? I know for me personally, being someone of a victim of abuse, I'm in therapy. I'm constantly trying to be a better human for myself, for the people I work with, and for my children and my partner, because that leaves an imprint on you. And that's where you can start. You can simply just start by talking about what you've struggled with, what you've experienced with, and really peel the onion of understanding how where that like not wanting to support the community comes from. It's starting with like it starts in conversations with people or like a
Mhm.
therapist. I'm pro therapy here as a social worker in CYC. um, but I think, yeah, just going back to like that shame that you talked about, I went through that as well, where I was straightening my hair every day, and I wasn't embracing my beautiful mane on my head.
Yeah.
Um,
100%.
so I think that we really need to just take a deeper dive in understanding where that lack of support comes from, why there's a lack of not wanting to support each other, and then like how do we overcome that? What is the work that needs to get done? And then how do we support this whole notion of healing as a community, like
Mhm.
as a community, to come together and heal and have these like really deep conversations of like trauma um that people went through.
Yeah.
So, and are we ready for it?
Yeah, and that's a huge one, right? I mean, I think that what you encourage, and us peeling it back like an onion, it's a time where I'm going to plug something that I often encourage people to do when they have something that they don't really know what's at the root, which is use the why ladder, right? Which is you ask yourself a question, you say why, you answer it out loud, and you keep going with that why and answering, right? So you can actually get to the root of kind of what's holding you back in a given situation, right? And I think that this would be a really good one, whether we do this solo or maybe in a group setting with people you trust, where we actually go around and be like, why? Right? Let's try and unpack it. It doesn't have to be so heavy all the time, right? Like we can actually, we can enjoy the experience of unpacking and reconnecting with ourselves and really understanding how to do things differently moving forward, right? It doesn't have to be all like, shame and doom and gloom and like you're the worst person ever kind of thing, right? We can actually have a decent conversation around it, right? So, I encourage more of us to really take that chance. Go out on a limb and bring up a different type of topic for a conversation amongst your people. Chances are they're probably dying to have this type of conversation with you or somebody, and they'll be very happy you brought it up. I definitely want to encourage that. And Sarah, I'm curious, like from your perspective, right? Working the way you do, being a mom and a partner, and all the other hats that you wear, right? What are some elements that you think would really signal that we're healing as a community?
I feel like the steps that first need to be taken would probably just like coming together. If there's something that is hosted, like for example, Fazia, I think
Mhm.
that's her. Yeah. Um, she hosted that amazing Guyana Day experience
We
for
did, yeah.
and that was phenomenal. My mom and my granny went, and my mom was like, man, if you see them Guyanese people, so much Guyanese people come and they had casa and them had food and it was so nice. And it was just so nice to experience that from a political person,
Right.
like in a political space. That representation, we talk, representation matters.
Yeah.
Um, I think if something was organized like that, where we're focusing on healing and
Mm.
communicating and healing. Um, that's one step. Or that's the first step
Yeah.
of like coming together to figure out what does this look like. Um, Brown Girl Diary, they do a lot of work on like bringing the therapists together, the Caribbean therapists together to talk about, to check in, to see how they're doing. Um, and like that's been really great, that network. I think the coming together is missing, the networking piece of like just chatting. We're all working in like siloed spaces, so to have a community that we can lean upon, um I think is just the start.
Yeah. I like that. And, I would really love to work on, curating some of those events, like you mentioned, where we can actually have more of us in the same space, talking about some different things and really building that intimacy and sense of you're not alone, right? There is community out there who wants to welcome us all in with open arms, right? And community, like, I think that the word even community, gets kind of a bad rap at sometimes. Sometimes our imaginations go a little wild, but community is really a sense of just feeling connected to something, right?
Hmm.
Like it's not, it doesn't have to be, everyone wearing the same clothes and dancing around in a cult or something like that. That's not community, that's a very misunderstood idea of community. But community is really about feeling connected, right? Feeling like the people around you, it being a joy rather than a burden to say hi to the people around you, right? It's really just familiarity with your ecosystem and feeling like you belong and that there's space for everybody. That's kind of how I see community, and why it's so important and why it's really showing up for more of us, especially nowadays where we feel more lonely and isolated, and life is so one dimensional, You know, you could literally never leave your home and you could order your groceries, do your work, earn money, have all your entertainment, all of it, right? You don't necessarily have to interact with something outside of yourself. But I think we're all coming up to this wall where we're seeing actually deep down, what's bugging me, what's really got all this stuff within my body is the sense of me not belonging to anything, or being a part of, or being seen by or valued by people who look like me, people who are a part of similar things as me, who have similar interests, you know? So I think
Mhm.
that's going to be crucial. You know, I know that we are running out, or we're wrapping on time here, but I have one more question before I let you go, Saira, and it's this, you know, are there some ancestral practices that you know that our people at one point did, right, that you would love to see make a return, that you think could really help some of us? And, you know, where I'm going with this, for example, is, you know, we had an opportunity to sit around a fire together, right? As a family, right? And there was just something so magical and healing about doing that. We didn't have to talk, we didn't have to eat, we could just be around this fire. And to me, that was kind of like a throwback to times when communities would gather around fires and, you know, everyone could just come and be, right? You tell stories, you just exist and look at the stars, things like that, right? So to me, that's like flashback of, oh, this is a time that we once lived. Clearly my heart is calling for this, and clearly I feel so much better now that I had this type of opportunity. So, you know, things like that. Have you identified some of those that you either brought into your own, you know, daily practices, or that you just really like to see come back to the community because they would be high impact for us?
I feel like for me, with like just within my home, prayer.
Hmm.
So I like whether it's like I don't specifically affiliate with a specific religion,
Yep.
um, but like praying, I pray with my kids every day, morning and night, and whether we're praying to the universe or God, um, that's I truly believe in just like thanking someone
Mm.
something for being here
Yeah.
and being earth. And then I also like I just remember growing up and just having those like family get-togethers
Mhm.
and um and just like having fun and eating my food, like the cultural food, and dancing in the basement. Like it's like dancing in the basement and like having fun with my cousins and just getting together more. And I know a lot of us are like we have our chosen family or our chosen people because of like family disputes and like a lot people don't know each other or whatever. And I think that's a whole other topic to get into of like how do you repair that?
Yeah.
How do you repair family conflicts, and how do you connect so that like your kids know their cousins
Right.
potentially. So but that's a whole other thing. That's something that I miss, and something that I want my kids to grow up with, going driving to New York to see all the family.
Yeah.
That's something that my husband grew up with, and we've tried to do New York once a year so that our kids know their cousins in New York, going back home to Guyana and Trinidad. That's something I grew up on as well. Um, but as an ancestral practice, I really feel like the coming together and hanging out and laughing and just chatting, and that was a huge piece of like healing for like my mom and her sisters, um or my dad and his friends, back in the day. And I
Yeah.
don't think we do enough of that, enough connecting. I try my best, but
Mm.
it's tough when it's just when you're tired and you're always the one doing it. It's exhausting. um
Absolutely.
so I don't know. Yeah, that's something that I would like to see more.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You know, I think I resonate with so many of those things. You know, I've either been personally experienced some of those things or seen, you know, people in my family and how much joy that's brought to them to do those things. And Yeah, everyone's kind of just like the good old days. Those are the good old days
Yeah.
nowadays, right? So I do hope that more of us really get curious about exploring, kind of some of our hangups as to why we have maybe resisted healing and resisted the community coming together and really strengthening those bonds because all of us can get something out of that. Right? Not everyone is out there to, take from you and, all these kind of things. There are a lot of people who want to give to you as well, right? And I think that sometimes we lean into too many of those experiences where we were burned and we kind of just write off a whole, community of people. And I think that that's not going to serve any of us, right? Because we end up missing out on one another's gifts and all these beautiful relationships that we could have, but we're kind of choosing to go in the other direction. So, Saira, before we wrap out here, I just want to share with you a few of the comments that came through. I know we were deep in the conversation.
I'm not like it's not updating. I think the last one
Okay.
I saw from Priya where she's waving. That's it.
Okay, no worries. So from Aminta, we have happy to be here. Looking forward to this discussion. Christina's been supporting all the way through. She said, "Wicked collab, my faves." We got some love from Safira. Appreciate you. We got the health spot, which is where you're sitting. They sent some hearts, and you're even what you talked about. You're even representing for the community in being there. You know what I mean? For those who don't know, the health spot is a space that Saira's working out of at this moment. For certain days. Suki and I, when we were in Canada, we were actually using there as a workspace as well. It's a clinic that's run by a beautiful human, Sabrina, and she is of Guyanese heritage. So if you're looking to support the Guyanese space, here's yet another opportunity for you. Beautiful space, incredibly affordable, incredibly human, and you can create some beautiful experiences for your clients. So if you're needing a space outside of maybe one you've been familiar with, that's a great one to go to. We have Safira, who said slay, so many titles. Yes, you do have so many titles. Um, we have from Ashta, the struggle of not being Indian enough and not being coolie West Indian enough is real. My goodness, that I think is a whole conversation all in itself because I can't tell you. I still don't know what I'm enough of based on other people's feedback. Uh, um,
That's a whole other
it
conversation
is.
that I could go into.
I'm going to book you in for that one too. Christina, incredible conversation. Khadija, she said that she's loving this conversation. And then we have, just a lot of love and, emoticons and whatnot. Kimmy contributed, just letting us know that, there are multiple truths that are at play here. And then we got some blurriness. And Wumaline said it's so important to lift as we rise. We can be the change we want to see. And she loves this entire conversation.
Aw.
Um, yeah, we got my mom said gratitude practice makes all the difference. Family gatherings rock. We've been bringing that back. One of our favorite humans, Suki, had said, "Love you both. Such a great conversation." My mom said, "Thanks for this. You're so welcome, Mom." And yeah, so Saira, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me. This was as much for me as I hope it has been for the community. And thank you for sharing your medicine and showing up as you do, because you truly, truly make a difference. And I get to see that on a daily basis. You're out there. I don't know how you do it, but you do it. And, I'm so grateful that you're on this planet at the same time as me so that I can witness what you're doing because it's truly incredible.
Oh, you're so sweet. No, thank you. And
You're
honestly,
welcome.
thank you for creating this space for us to have this conversation and just drop seeds of thoughts.
It's a lot.
Um, Folks who tune in now and tune in later, because hopefully this can bring another change to what is coming for the next generation. And so thank you, Josh, for creating your podcast. And I'm excited for more conversations like
Thank
this.
you. Thank you. Well, before you do depart, Sarah, I want to ask just if you could share with everybody how they can get in touch with you, the different reasons why they might want to connect with you, and how they can support all the different things that you have going on.
Oh gosh, there's so many.
Go for it.
Okay, well, so as I mentioned, I'm a registered social worker, so I'm a registered psychotherapist. So then you can follow me on my Lotus account, lotuscounseling.org. That's me. And I'll have a few more therapists that will be coming on in the coming weeks. Um, So there's also my personal Instagram account if you want to chat. And then my mom and I have a non-for-profit called Building Togetherness, where we send items back to Guyana, and we have partners in Guyana that we support. So there's that you could follow as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, it would be like I'm always happy to have conversations with folks. Always happy to support our community if they're struggling with mental health challenges. And if I'm not a right fit, then I'm happy to find you someone who will be a good fit. And yeah.
And if people are looking to have you say at their spaces, whether that's to speak on a topic or maybe lead some type of session or experience, is that something that's available to people that they can reach out to you for?
Sure. They can connect with me just like directly on my personal Instagram. So Saira.Batasar-Johnie.
Awesome. And for those who are interested in reading the literature that you put out and will be putting out in the future, where's the best place for them to find that and purchase that?
Everything that I've ever done is in my link tree in my bio.
Excellent.
Um, so it's online. I recently wrote a short story for a publisher called Chalkboard. It's called Sunday Morning Mandir with a Big Potted Doll. It's a very like heartwarming story. I've heard a lot of feedback that from people that when they read it, they just like it's like a big hug, and that's the vibe that I was going for. So
Yeah.
I'm glad. And they're like, "Were you raised in Mandir?" I'm like, "No, it's my complete imagination." And it's a spin-off from characters from Dear Divya. So
Okay.
so yeah, I think people who read it will really like it.
Beautiful. All right. Well, everyone, definitely be sure to check it out. It's time very well invested. These are very heartwarming stories, things that are going to make you think, help you feel, and really help you heal, which is really what we're about. So, we hope you've enjoyed this conversation that's really been around community healing in the Caribbean culture. We look forward to seeing your comments. Thank you to everyone who participated in the live conversation. And once this is posted, please feel free to drop your feedback, any questions you have around this. We'll definitely be checking back with that and checking in with you in case there are any of those questions that have come up for you. So until next time, thank you once again, Saira, and thank you everyone for all the love you've shown for us today. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.